Is my voice going to be heard? Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, we're with Dr. Seymour and Anne Renee Grossman. Welcome to the World Good News Network.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Tell us what your particular fields of expertise are.
Well, my field of expertise is the field of marital therapy. I'm a psychiatrist, and in the 19 years of practicing psychiatry, I've discovered that marital therapy is the most rewarding and most interesting part of my profession, and also the field where most good work can be done, because in working with two people, you're also helping their children and future generations.
What are the specific ways that you help them?
The specific way is basically a couple comes to me when they're in trouble. I'd like very much for them to come to me before they get into trouble. I have many patients who come to me in the process of dating, and they're going to get married, and they realize they're having problems already, so they come to me to prevent problems after marriage. But as you know, half the couples today half the couples are ending up in divorce, and it's important that something be done to prevent this attrition rate, and that couples be saved from going down the divorce route. Most people, when they get married, are very much in love, and to see a marriage go down the rocks after they get married is a very tragic thing. But the question is, why does this occur? Why do people end up in divorce who, prior to marriage, are very much in love? And I've spent many years looking into this and trying to find this out, and also looking into my own marriage. And there is a reason. There's a very interesting set of dynamics that can be seen in marriage that are helpful to understand why people get into trouble. The question of what makes a marriage, why do people before marriage do so well and after marriage get into trouble? It brings up a whole question of dynamics and what goes on between two people. Prior to marriage, should I go into this? Okay. Prior to marriage, when people fall in love, it's a very special spiritual and sexual relationship. And there's nothing that happens in that could possibly deter two people from getting married, usually. Once they get married, something enters the marriage, which is part of my theory that I've learned over the years of working with a lot of couples, and that is a fear of incest. Now, that sounds very Freudian, but if I go back and help you understand why I come to this conclusion, you'll see why this theory is really excellent in working with married couples who are having difficulties.
And you're looking at a real live example of how it works.
Okay. We'll hear more about that later, I imagine.
Okay. First of all, you were born to love. That's a very important concept. A baby, when it's born, opens its eyes, sees its parents, loves with its heart. The heart is the heart pushes a spiritual flow of love through all the blood vessels. So the whole body gets warm with the spiritual flow. And you see that in the baby's skin turning pink. As the baby feels love for the parents, the love from the heart reaches into the soul through the spiritual flow, going to all the blood vessels, especially the genitals. The genitals open up because of a very rich blood supply down below. But this is a spiritual flow. Between 3 and 5, every little boy gets very close to his mother. Says, "Mom, I love you, I'm going to marry you." This concept of a woman is his mother. He learns this, and he therefore becomes heterosexual later on. A girl says, heterosexual, right. Later on, a girl says, also at that time, a little girl, 3, 4, 5, says, "Daddy, I love you, I'm going to marry you." She too wants to marry her father at a later age, but in order to marry him, she must love him intensely. So they learn to love intensely during this early childhood. When they reach adolescence, suddenly there's a new heart that develops down below. It's a sexual heart. Boy goes out, sees a beautiful girl, gets sexually aroused, and realizes something new is happening. When he comes home, his mother hugs him, and his heart opens up with love for his mother, as it always has, and the spiritual flow going through his body is felt in the genitals, as it always has, because the genitals are a spiritual organ as well as a sexual organ. And since they can't differentiate, since there is no brain down below, the brain now must stop the young man from thinking sexual and brings in the incestual taboo toward his mother. This incest taboo is necessary so that a boy doesn't mix up his physicality and sexuality. And so in this way, he pushes his mother away, and it goes on. The girl does the same thing with her father. She too pushes her father away, because this is a normal psychological development at 13 and 14. And much of your adolescence and many of your problems are because boys push the mothers away and girls push the fathers away. But it's necessary, and parents must not take this personally, like they made a mistake or done something wrong. And many parents, unfortunately, become very anxious and tense when their children reject them. And they fall in love with one another. Here's a very interesting situation. When a young man falls in love with a young woman, there's a spiritual and sexual flow that goes on. Now the sexuality makes it 10 times greater So the young man loves this woman more than he loves his mother. And she loves him more than she loves her father. So this is the fire that makes them want to get married and leave their parents.
How do you keep that fire burning?
By not getting married and by not living with one another. Now, people that move in with one another have the same problems as those who get married very often. They too begin to feel this incestual feeling towards one another. Why is there incestual feeling? Because when a young man is dating a young girl, there is no problem because they're close, there are no problems there. When they move into one another, she begins to care for him in a maternal way. He begins to care for her in a maternal way, and they go through an adolescent reaction to one another, and this is where the incest taboo comes out between each other, and they push each other away. One may push the other one away more than the other one. It depends on the dynamics of each person and their background.
So what are the processes then that you employ yourselves to avoid this from taking place?
Awareness.
Awareness.
The process that we've employed together.
What is that process?
I think that when you go back to day one and you think about our courting and that we met and were married in 3 months, and it was Cinderella, and it was the Prince Charming on the white charger coming along, as it is with many couples, and you have this marvelous, the world is opening up, and it's hearts and flowers and candy. In 3 months we were married, and all of a sudden, on our honeymoon, the ring was put on our honeymoon. Up comes the New York Times, and all of a sudden all this romance is out the window, and you say, wait a second, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. And you wake up and say, wait, we are married, aren't we? We started to play house together, and playing house means that all those unconscious things that Cy has taught me about get awakened. Well, he's no longer my lover and my friend, he's my father, unconsciously.
At that time.
At that time, at that point in time, and I become his mother and no longer his lover at that point.
And I was not aware of my New York Times, or my not listening to her, or my suddenly being involved with other people and not her, or my not opening a door for her as I used to before marriage. The niceties that go on when you love each other suddenly change on your honeymoon, and when you get back, when you start moving in, you realize that you're living together very intimately, and then the incestual fears take over as they did in adolescence. You see, because when you take your vows, you add another dimension. When I say to my wife, I will take care of you spiritually and sexually and now paternally, I become somewhat a father. She says to me, yes, and she says, I'll take care of you spiritually, sexually, and maternally. I suddenly feel a maternal nature that she didn't have before I married her, and I began to react as an adolescent would with his mother, and not as sensitive to her as I had been before. And I suddenly feel a wall. And many other problems arise in marriages I've treated. People start fighting each other, they get violent with one another, they get sick, they get depressed, they end up going back to their parents because they can't leave their parents. You see, because when you get married, you also break off with emotionally. You're supposed to break off with your parents. You see, but it's very difficult. You can't break off with your parents.
Okay, so there's specific things that both the husband and the wife have to do. Why don't you both handle what the husband do to keep that wall from being erected? What does the wife have to do that's different, or is it exactly the same, or what?
Well, my wife can tell you what she did to make me aware. Right. It's awareness. You have to become. And this is what I do with my patients. I make them aware of what they're doing to one another, and then they begin to change it. And through their sensitivity, they begin to realize what's going on, and so they can have a hold on this unconscious process, which causes distance.
I think that there was a real awakening, and I just we're the kind of people together that really can share a lot with each other that we had going for us back then. And I said, wait a second, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. What happened to Prince Charming? And Cy all of a sudden was knocked back on his heels. You know, he didn't realize that this thing, it's almost like the creeping, crawling goop that takes over in the marriage, and all of a sudden you say, well, this isn't the person I got married to. I think the first thing is the awareness, to allow, to say to the other person, to say to your spouse, listen, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. And of course, we worked on it.
What I did was I made her feel very guilty, so she was afraid to tell me what was wrong. I made her feel it was her fault. She was constantly trying to be the perfect woman.
I forgot about that.
And the more perfect she became, the more hostile I became to her, because she was becoming super mother. And I want incest with my mother. It's an unconscious taboo at 13, which helps you separate from your mother. It's nature's way of saying, goodbye, mother, I'm going to meet a woman and get married now. If it weren't for the incest taboo, many boys live with their mothers till the very end of their lives. And so that the incest taboo is an unconscious feeling that guards you against your mother, but it comes into marriage and protects you from getting close to what you want to get close to.
Okay. So do you feel that if couples were aware of these processes that are going on apparently in everybody, that's just unavoidable at first, but yet if they were at this higher consciousness, this higher spiritual awareness and so on, this 50% divorce rate would not exist?
That would not exist. There's always going to be some people that are not going to be compatible. Not everyone marries out of love. People marry for many reasons. But a good number, 2/3 of this rate, I believe 2/3 of this 50% that are divorced could be saved. And that 2/3 is a huge amount, and all the suffering that their kids go through when they divorce. It's very painful to see people when they go through the divorce. In my practice, most of the patients that I see stay together, and I work with them. It may take several months, and I get them together, and they keep working with me.
You write poetry?
I write poetry, and it's a very good release for me, and I enjoy the sensitivity of what poetry does for me. And sometimes when a patient or a couple does extremely well, I kind of give them a bonus, and I feel their progress, and I want to celebrate with them what's happened. And so I write them a poem, and it's very therapeutic in a way. It's meant to.
You're treating love alive.
Yes, very well said.
Very much alive.
Yes, it keeps love alive.
Right. You were nodding your head there about, this third of the 50% could be saved.
Oh,
Why do you feel that?
I feel so strongly about it. It hurts me when I hear about all the divorce around. And I don't know how those people can come to see someone and get help, but I think premarital counseling would be a dynamite thing to do. But those 2/3 that can be saved, I mean, can if they have some basic insight at the very beginning, they're not going to have fractured marriage walls that build over the years and make for such unhappiness. I just feel that divorce prevention is something that can exist very easily if they go for help.
Well, what are danger signals that couples should watch out for specifically in their relationship?
I think if you can compare what your relationship was during the mating time, during that courtship time, during that spiritually wonderful time, you can rekindle that. You can say to yourself, well, I don't like this contrast. What's going on here? This isn't the way he was. He wasn't, he's not warm to me anymore. He doesn't have that spark anymore. He gives me orders instead of shares things with me. And the same for a man. She turns off. She doesn't talk to me, etc. And there's awareness. If they can see the contrast of what it was like before, and hey, this is the way it is after. I don't like this feeling. It's uncomfortable, but yet I don't know how I can really express myself.
Aren't you really assuming that the maturation level of couples is very high? Because you're talking about a high order of honesty, a high order of communication. Do you think when you know there are a lot of immature people get married right well beforehand, while they're waiting, isn't this what you're saying? There's sort of assume there's sort of a decent maturation level?
This no matter what maturity level there is, the communication is very, very important. The spiritual closeness. This couple was immature before marriage, was close and was verbal and enjoyed sharing things and had a wonderful feeling of rapport, and suddenly it dies 2 days after marriage. I mean, you can help these people by helping them understand what the psychological development it has done to them, especially what the incestual fears are all about. People understand this. I mean, it sounds very Freudian, but I do a very acute, intense kind of therapy where they do understand this in terms of their own lives. And they don't have to go on for years until I give them an answer. I prefer giving the answer as soon as possible so they can work with it. They can fight me on it, they can say you're wrong, but eventually, after several sessions, they begin to realize why my theory is correct. They see the wife usually supports my husband, so they can see what's going on here, and they help each other as a result.
It seems that by coming to you also, they probably want to save the marriage.
Yes.
I mean, they're taking some action here, right?
That's right.
So you've got that on your side, right?
That's right.
Working for you.
That helps a great deal, but it's those couples that don't come to me that I worry about, and that's why I'm here, because I'd like to get to those couples that never would come to see me, so that they would understand that there is hope. Another thing, you pointed out a very good thing when you said the level of maturity. Many people when they get, may seem to be mature until they get married. And all of a sudden, after marriage, a husband or the wife becomes very mature, or they begin to lack a certain kind of level of success. They may not do very well, and they change, it seems, after marriage. There is another process that goes on. As I said before, parents love their children very much. They adore their children. They want their children to be close to them. For many parents, the children are their best friends. They have no one else that they can really get close to but their children. So they're very reluctant to let go of their children. So what they do, unconsciously, without any awareness, is they leave in the mind of the child a certain kind of force that says to them, don't grow but don't go. In other words, it's okay for you to grow, but don't leave us. And as a result, the child gets this message, and when he gets married, the concept of leaving the parents is so intense that something happens emotionally that makes him regress into immaturity, so that he goes unconsciously, again, in the mind, back to his parents, not to his wife. So this is where the immaturity level goes.
All right. We have about a minute left.
Okay.
So I'd like both of you to sort of just to sum up the whole thrust of what it is that makes your marriage work and what you think will be of most interest to our viewers in their relationship.
What makes my marriage work is that we can fight, but this is a fighting on a sweet, loving, angry, whatever level, without really, well, we hurt each other every now and then in the past. But I think as years have gone by, our communication level has increased. I look at her now in a restaurant. Did you ever notice in restaurants people don't look at one another? They're looking at the waiter or some pretty girl that's walking by.
Yeah.
But we've learned not to do that anymore. We relate to each other in a restaurant because that's where walls come up somehow. You see the walls in restaurants the most, more than any place else. But we learned to do that. We learned to hold hands. We've learned to try to understand one another. We've tried to analyze why she's in a bad mood. What's bothering her? What have I done to her in that bad mood? We like to make each other stay at a higher level of happiness. And I think happiness is possible for all of us. But we obsess about, being unhappy keeps us regressed back in our childhood. We either mature or we go back. We go back and forth as individuals from maturity to immaturity.
All right, thank you. And Renee?
Yeah, I think that everything that Si said makes a lot of sense, and I think in the reverse, it works just as much because he checks on me and I check on him. I mean, there's many a time where we'll be walking on the street and he'll walk 3 steps ahead of me and I'll say, where's your rush? I'm with you. I'm here. Mm-hmm. And we share that together. You know, that's just a small example, but there's sort of a safety check that we kind of balance with each other, and it's really very exciting. It makes every day worthwhile as a couple. It allows you to really be creative in your own separate field, but you come back to your fireplace at home, and he's my fireplace.
We've been constantly breaking walls down, and our communication has increased as a result. That's the communication that makes life so sweet.
Well, thank you for coming and sharing a mutually supportive relationship with us.
Work on it.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Excellent.
Pleasure.